So talking about culture, there's a lot of common themes that have been sitting in a lot of the different presentations throughout the day. And so you're going to see a lot of, I think, reinforcement of key concepts. What we're going to talk about today is just understanding key elements of your culture, and I think you'll get different perspectives on that from each of the different speakers. How to potentially benchmark and measure cultural improvements. There's the concept that this is an evolution, this is not a revolution, and so it's important to benchmark and understand how you're doing in cultural change. Prioritize and focus on culture drivers and utilizing change management best practices throughout it. First thing I want to start out with, and you can get a little laughter if it helps, but culture is not a new issue. You go back in any writings at any point in time throughout history, and culture is a key thing to why we're not able to get things done, or as a key point to why something was successful. And so this was something I found about 20 years ago. Petronius Arbor, you can look it up, it was an actual person. But how true is this statement, right? This is something that we all look back on and say, we tried to do a lot of the right things, but it really just didn't make the difference that we needed it to. And so we're going to talk through today some of the things that you should do. See, I'm getting good airplay. People are taking a picture of the slide. So if you think about the nature of changes that are going on within organizations today, we continue to evolve in the amount of change, the pace of change, the nature of change that are going on in organizations. Before, it used to be that we could make a change within a company and it really impacted maybe one part of that company, one function, one group, one process within the organization. Today, organizations are so interconnected that if you change one part of the organization, you're creating change throughout every aspect of the organization. And so there is no such thing as a siloed change anymore. And a couple other concepts is they're mostly strategic today. Success is critical, failure is not an option. You're spending money, you want to get a return, you want to get benefit back from that. And culture alignment and employee engagement are the things that are going to make these changes successful. They're the things that will bring it down, and they're the things that are going to make it successful. And people will tell you that within the organization. One of the most interesting things, this was probably about 10 or 15 years ago, if I wanted to see how a change was going on in a company, I would go out to Yahoo Finance and look at the postings that were on there. It was kind of like the early version of Twitter. And you would start to see people's feeling about whether or not an organization was actually going to be able to make that change based on how their employees, stockholders, and customers felt. And you go out there and see some pretty interesting comments throughout that. People familiar with John Kotter, or ever read the book Leading Change? Yes, a few. If you have not, I would recommend this. This is one of the most practical ways of thinking about change management, and therefore culture change. And Kotter lays out really 8 reasons why organizations fail at change. And we've seen a lot more maturity in the marketplace around change management. Organizations kind of moving through these 8 steps and doing a lot of the right things. But the thing still that is holding organizations back is we really, that last one, we neglect to anchor change to the culture of the organization. We don't take time to understand our cultures within our companies. We don't take stock into all the different things that make up what culture is. And therefore, we don't get the sustainability. We might make some really good changes, we might make good progress towards change, but ultimately we don't get there because we're not making it part of who we are. Right? So within change management, one of the sayings we always hear is, you know what, that's not going to work because it's not how we do things here. And so knowing that and taking it into account is very important. It's also important to understand, and you've seen kind of throughout the day different perspectives on this, that culture is made up of a lot of different things. Culture includes past, so our history and our values, present things, our habits, our rules for success, and then future. What is the image of the organization? What is the self-image that we're trying to portray? And what is the future vision that we're trying to talk to? And if we don't understand that there's all 3 of those components, we will fail at making culture change. And the most that we forget about is really that past, right? Our past defines us. I tell the story at times that I came home one night, I love spending time with friends, but when you're caught by surprise with it, it's something that can catch you off guard and make you not feel as good about something. And so I came home, it was a long day at work, did not have a very good day. I walked in and my wife walked up to the door and kind of announced to me that we had 4 other couples in our basement, there for the night, ready to have a real nice dinner. Most of the time I would have been very excited about that because my past defined that. This one time I was not. And so it's important, again, just to understand that broader picture. One of my favorite sayings, some people will say it's dinner, some people will say it's breakfast, but culture eats strategy for lunch. Strategy is important. Strategy is something that we need to continue to question. There are no such things really as 3 to 5 year strategies anymore. We're really looking at 12 to 18 month strategies. But if you don't take culture into account, again, we're going to run into a lot of issues. Strategy is great, but if you're not getting people to understand it and believe it, you're not going to make the progress you need to make. And so when we look at culture, there's a lot of different things that we need to understand that have to change as part of that. The behaviors that we expect from people. And behavior change is very hard to make. One of the things that we do within projects is we actually create what's called a behavior roadmap. We understand what are the behaviors today, what are the behaviors that we would like to see, what are going to be the issues or challenges that we have in actually trying to drive that type of behavior change. How do we incent that kind of behavior going forward? How do we measure and recognize it over periods of time? We also have to understand the critical capabilities and decisions about where to compete as defined by the strategy of the organization. And when we talk about being able to make decisions, there's a lot that goes on within organizations today about reporting or business intelligence, predictive analytics, right? All these different phrases. And we believe that just by giving people more data, they're going to make better decisions. And we know that's not the case. If people knew that they could make better decisions, if they knew how to think differently about the business, trust me, they'd find ways to get to data. They wouldn't wait for a new tool to do that. And so we have to understand those capabilities, and as an example, one of those is teaching people how to think differently. And that in of itself is a change management effort. We also have to take into account the operating model of the organization. Always befuddles me of walking into companies that are trying to drive certain types of change within the organization, but they're not looking at alignment with things like processes and structure. So I walk in and an organization will say, we're trying to drive more of a collaborative culture, but you look at the organizational structure and it's 19 levels deep, right? Or processes that are so just deep and so many different steps that that's going to hold people back from collaboration. So this aspect of organizational alignment is also very important in driving effective culture change. The other thing is, we've heard a lot around culture change that we need leaders to be engaged. This needs to be a top-down effort. Yes, that is very important, but it also needs to come from the bottom as well. Your people will help you to define the right culture for moving forward. If you engage them, if you talk to them, we know that a basic within effective change management is getting people involved in the change. Now, there's the right balance to that. You're not going to be able to go out in an organization of 50,000 people and get everybody's input and have big town hall meetings and drive that, but you do need to make sure that you're engaging with a good subset of those people, because if people see their peers involved, they're more apt to believe that this is the right direction to go. So from a top-down standpoint, you need to define the vision and goals. It has to be clear. You need to share what the strategy is. You need to share that it is realistic. People need to believe that it can be achieved. You need to align the culture to the strategic goals. But from the bottom-up standpoint, these are the most critical things that you can do. You have to build belief. People have to believe that this is achievable and that you can do this, that the organization can do this. And so if you go back to Kotter's 8 steps of quick wins, showing progress, again, evolution versus revolution. There are very, very few organizations that have been able to truly drive organizational and cultural change. And those that do, it's that employee engagement, it's quick wins, it's showing progress, and it's recognizing and celebrating those wins and changing how you recognize and involve people in things. There's other ways to get insights into your culture as well. Anybody do culture surveys or employee engagement surveys within the organization? This is a great insight into an organization. There are some kind of silly questions that might be out there. There's one that asks, I have a best friend at work. May not be the greatest indicator of things. It will tell you some things. But if you start looking at some of the broader responses to these questions about trust and leadership, about how information is shared, about how people understand the strategy of the organization, if they feel they can impact things like customer strategy or customer experience. These types of surveys are a great way to get insights. And those that are effective are looking at multiple dimensions within these surveys. It's not just looking at culture, but it's looking at things like strategy and vision, asking people what core values are, not just asking if they understand the core values. Change history is a great indicator of future. Asking people, we may believe a change was successful, but asking people, let's look at the last big change the organization went through. How did you think it went? Always get a lot of very good, interesting insights that way. Customer focus, now in the day and age of customer experience, is a very important question to ask. Do people understand the customer strategy? Do they feel like they have an impact to our customers, to your customers? Career development, trust and authenticity, and how people feel supported in the workforce. And so these types of employee engagement and culture surveys need to be multidisciplinary and look at a lot of different factors in order to get a good insight into the culture of a company. Anybody hear of the concept of adaptive cultures? So this is a very important, not necessarily new, but concept that is more and more out within theories as well as in practical application, that the organizations that are able to adapt their culture, not change their culture. Again, cultural change holistically is very difficult to do, but the adaptive culture of trying to drive new ways of thinking, making a culture that is more change ready, that can continue to react to things that are happening, predict maybe what's going to be coming, is going to be really the organizations that are most successful. Those that understand this concept of adaptive cultures and can take that into account as we go forward. So again, hopefully some good additional tidbits. I know a lot of repetition of key theories, but that also tells you that this is a very important concept as you talk through it. We'll open it up for any questions if there are any. If not, we can also save those for the panel as we get into that in about an hour. All right, thank you.